Greetings and bienvenue, MITZU. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Post your worst nightmare story. Walking through a fancy gallery, paintings, sculptures. Slowly feel dread as I walk. Art gets more depraved and sinister. Get to an enormous painting that was the most terrible thing to me. Picture is of me with 6 arms holding different things. Scream so loud I wake up my friend, sleep over. He has to shake me awake as I'm just screaming, asks me WTF, lie about it, tells me he thought I was being murdered. Haha, yeah, sorry. Back to sleep.
What were you holding in those 6 hands?
A cup of tea on a saucer, a feather-type quill, a book, some type of oddly shaped fruit, and 2 things I couldn't make out. This was 20 years ago, but I still remember. Teacup was on the lower left arm, quill above it, book in the middle right, and the fruit below that. Then 2 mystery things above the shoulders.
I feel like this thread will sink, but I have 2 good ones. First one, I was in a square pool of water with super high concrete walls surrounding it. The water was absolutely packed with bloated, rotting bodies, and I was drowning in it. I could feel the bits of flesh that had rotted off the bodies in my mouth as I was drowning. Shit went on way too long. Second one, I was on a train and slowly lost control of my body. For example, I tried moving my arm a little bit, but it turned into me throwing my arm. The more I tried to get control back, the more I flailed. I was trying to apologize and ask people for help, but my words were coming out as screams. As I got more panicked, the flailing and the screaming got worse. Eventually, my inner monologue just turned into screaming and I completely lost my mind. Tried self-terminating myself by banging my head on a wall because it was all I could do. Both dreams were super vivid because I just quit smoking cold turkey, but the train one screwed me up for like a week, because it felt like I actually experienced completely losing my mind.
I can't stop having horrible dreams of what you could describe as alien invasions. Truly, I don't know if they're aliens or old ones or angels bringing the end of the world on sinners or whatever. Last one was 1 night ago. Gigantic, colorful balls with complex patterns drawn on them were floating above a giant city, like none I've seen in my life. The buildings were absurdly tall and curvy, almost no angles, white with a lot of trees and bushes mixed with the architecture of the city. The streets were very tight, no cars, no roads, just pavement or cement. Entire city blocks were crushed in a blink by some gravitational field or whatever the balls were producing. Oh yeah, and to make everything more interesting, they also were turning humans into rabid flesh-eating banshees. Black eyes, 2 triangular teeth on the front, anyone infected starting to sprint at the nearest human still normal to tear it apart. I woke up and went to sleep again later, like 1 hour later, and the dream continued. Got infected and lost my vision gradually and my sanity and woke up again for good this time. It's not the first time. Got a lot more of them in the end of the world stories like that in store, and the weird thing is that I don't believe in aliens at all. I do consider the possibility of higher beings to be real, but not the classic Hollywood cliche of aliens. And I'm far from being obsessed with it, so why am I having such stupid nightmares?
Neat, please share more.
They're not really interesting to describe. You'll find better material in sci-fi movies. What's worrying is how it keeps coming back with a slightly different coat of paint. Like that time, white spaceships. Again, never any sharp angles in the dreams when there's strange stuff taking place. It's a recurring point from all dreams. Landed in front of our manor. I don't know where that manor came from. Never owned one. But in the dream it made sense, who knows why. And human-looking individuals wearing skin-tight white suits with white hair came to us and started killing us with laser blades. And another one in which the city I was in. Another weird instance of a city that has no city or town on Earth looking remotely identical to the weird buildings and streets I saw, with intricate and dark alleys, stairs and platforms and no place for cars, curved walls encompassing everything and closing on me. Little light managing to reach floor level. Got nuked, but you couldn't make the shape of the thing bombing us because of the clouds. Carpet bombing, nuclear explosions, advanced weaponry sparking death and destruction on us, invaders coming down to kill us, strange architecture, curved shapes and lack of angles, it's repeating for some reason. And in all of them I sensed genuine fear and urgency like in no dream before.
The idea of recurring dreams is really fascinating to me. Do you tend to have these dreams when you're stressed or anxious? I don't want to sound like an armchair psychologist, but I think recurring dreams, either exactly the same or very similar themes like yours, could be our subconscious's way of representing some ongoing problems. Like the aliens don't necessarily mean you're afraid of alien invasions, but maybe your brain chose that to represent something else you're anxious about.
Yeah, it's likely to be because of where my life is headed right now, gonna be homeless soon. And the thing that drained me the most when I was homeless was the fear of getting found. Used to hide in forests, and you're constantly on your guard and worrying about getting robbed by gypsies, attacked by beasts at night, or hunters contacting the police to trash your camp and throw everything you possess in the trash. Also, it sucks knowing you'll have to lose everything again. Not just electricity and water and a roof above your head and a bed, but also all of your stuff, because there's no way I can take them with me. Maybe the aliens represent society and how it repeatedly stomps on my privacy, rights and belongings, and leaves me to die in the fumes and ashes of what's left of home after nuking everything.
This had to have happened when I was around 6, me and Mother running in an underground tunnel, similar to pick-related but more dirt around the floor and walls. We're being chased by some sort of entity. Entity catches Mother, puts its hand around my mother's mouth, and I see her scream and her eyes instantly gloss over. I ran away, crying. Entity catches up to me, does the same thing. I try to scream. Nothing comes out. I feel like I'm being pulled somewhere. Wake up with my mother shaking me, saying I had been screaming for 5 minutes and wouldn't wake up. I'm pretty sure the entity was a reptilian, but at the time I had no idea what a reptilian even was. That was the worst and most vivid nightmare I've ever had in my life.
I was standing in a pool of bloody, knee-deep water, wearing some kind of older infantry uniform. Looked similar to the United States Marine Corps uniforms around the First Barbary War. I had a rifle. In the water were bodies wearing the same uniform as me. I looked up, and I saw a wheel with 7 spokes, all slightly warped into a shape like an S, rather than being perfectly straight. I woke up, and a voice outside of my own spoke to me. Not sleep paralysis, as I had rolled over to check the time. I wrote down what it said, and I've been confused since. This was also the night I finished reading Blood Meridian, so that probably aggravated the autism that led to this whole sequence of events.
What did the voice say?
3 things. 1. The wheel must not stop turning. 2. Your mouth can carry you further than you realize. 3. Go far if you have to. Some of it makes sense. I'm a fantastic presenter and speaker, for example, and about the wheel needing to keep turning. But why? That's the part I've stayed confused about.
Anyone else have black and white-like dreams? Be in a coastal town. Can't identify what place or country it was. I was outside in a backyard with people I assume were friends and family, but I couldn't recognize who they were. Everyone was having a good time. Have a sudden urge to look into the distance. See a mushroom cloud forming. I urge everyone to go inside the basement of the house. Too late. I can feel my whole body burning. See rows of houses being torn apart until it reaches me. I wake up.
Had a bunch, one kind of cool one that comes to mind often. On a large cruise ship. Daytime. In the cabin. I hear this huge cacophony of shocked voices as I run into the bathroom where the porthole is. This is not where the porthole is in reality, but in the dream it is. I hear this enormous rumbling sound go from nothing to everything in a moment. As I look out the porthole, I see sunlight and red brick houses in the near distance. Immediately, view is flipped downward toward the sea and everything goes black and I wake up. The interesting part of this dream is how it felt. I felt the ship flip on its side before presumably being knocked out by the enormous wave that just capsized the ship. Sometimes I'll lay in bed and just think about this dream. The sound of the people was indistinct but drew my attention to something wrong. It's cool how dreams work where you think it's just random events sometimes, but the way this dream felt so planned out and detailed. And of course feeling the ship flip over, land side down as though an enormous wave had just knocked it over. And it had to be an enormous ship, because my porthole view was so high up. The only other dream-like thing worth sharing is this one time when I was 18 or so. It was late morning, but I was still in bed. home alone. In the dream, someone said a short phrase to me. As I'm rousing, I hear it a second time. My eyes are open, looking at the ceiling, and hear an audible voice say the phrase a third time. I freaked out a little at that. Went around the house to make sure I was alone and outside to just know there were other people around. That was 22 years ago. The phrase was, "It's time to wake up." I don't recall anything strange happening that day or any event early that required my being awake at that time. But I often wonder if someone was about to break into my home or something, but saw me come outside looking in. I was frantic and decided not to risk it. I was 6'5" and fit back then. I wonder if I would have been stabbed in my sleep without the voice waking me, or something.
When I was 9, I dreamed for the first time about being chased by Satan. He wasn't right behind me, but I could feel that he was getting closer. That dream, for some reason, was in third person. I was running on the sidewalk, then I turned around the corner where my mother's store was located and entered it. My great-aunt was the cashier for some reason, and she handed me a box of matches, but only the part that slid out, and some matches fell off. I then got out and ran down the street and entered a nearby house, and the dream ended. The second dream I had was when I was 11. I was with other people in my dream, and we were adults dressed in military gear, and I had a weapon that I never had seen before in any video game, movie, or TV series that I had watched. We were walking down a road that goes through a mountain range between my hometown and another one nearby. The dream then changes to me in my hometown, still dressed like a soldier running away from Satan. In my desperation, I climbed a tree close to my house, and Satan slowly approached. He was dressed in a black suit, but his head was like a transparent blur, and his hands looked like that too. He extended his arm and was about to grab me when I woke up drenched in sweat. The third and final time I dreamed with him was when I was 13 or 14. I was standing on one side of my house's garage, and Satan was on the other side. I don't remember if I was an adult or my normal age at the time, but I was standing in a boxing position, and Satan was too. He was still dressed in a black suit, and his head and hands were transparent blurs again, and he was in a boxing position too. And I began approaching him, in the same boxing position, even though I didn't want to. It was like I had lost control over my legs. When I was about 5 feet away from him, I woke up, and that was the last time I dreamed with him. After that, I told my father, and he told me my grandfather used to dream about fighting Satan every once in a while.
Hi, X. I've been having a lot of vivid nightmares involving death and the devil lately. I figured I would post the most interesting ones in this thread. Maybe someone can post their own experiences or interpret mine in some way. I won't be green texting this for the sake of detail and coherence. Excuse my poor writing. The first two dreams are related and took place about 5 years apart from each other, the first one being around 10 years ago. I am in hell. It was a dark basement-looking area with a lot of tunnels. I find myself wandering aimlessly looking for the exit. The whole time I feel this presence from far away, which I assume to be Satan, following and closing in on me. After a while, the walls start somehow melting and glowing reddish. This is when I meet the devil for the very first time. He is riddled with red glowing scars, and one would think there is fire flowing through his veins. I remember talking to him, although I've forgotten the entirety of the exchange. The dream ends when the heat keeps rising during our talk and I pass out due to it. In the second dream, 5 years later, I woke up in the same area. This time I am under immense pressure to leave this place, remembering what had happened before. I start running down the tunnels, once again feeling him close in on me, this time even hearing his steps behind me, the walls getting brighter and brighter. I find a glass door with a light shining through it at the very end of a long tunnel and run in that direction. At this point, I am hearing the devil right behind me, and before I manage to walk through the door, he grabs me and tells me I can never leave. This concludes the second dream. The third incident is one that creeped me out a lot. This time I was awake, about to lay in bed and go to sleep at around 3 or 4 a.m. I had my window open, and since I live on the first floor of the building, you would hear the occasional car driving by very loud. It was also a very windy night. Being half asleep, I was woken up by said car driving past my house. For some reason, I felt scared. There was an eerie feeling lingering in the air. Not thinking much about it, I turned to the wall next to my bed and closed my eyes again. When this happened, the sound of the wind seemed to become louder and louder, almost deafening. I also felt a presence, again assuming the devil, appearing to cut open my stomach and perform some sort of surgery. Every time I would open my eyes, the wind would get silent, and the presence felt gone, but upon closing them, the same thing would happen again. Having enough of this, I wanted to turn on the light and sleep with it on. When I tried to move, I heard the sound of a deep impact. Everything felt like slow motion and I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis. I would see dark figures move in my peripheral vision. This only took on for about a minute. When I regained my movement, I rushed to the light switch and spent the night without batting an eye. In another dream, I found myself and a friend at a mall in my city. I had a day off of work and we were going to grab something to eat there. When we entered a restaurant, we somehow were met by a guide to tour us through the establishment. This took a dark turn as soon as I saw a very long staircase heading down into the ground. The area looked like some sort of run-down laboratory, with gray walls, dark stains, a lot of dust and webs, and humming fluorescent lights. The further we walked down, the louder the noise coming from 2 doors at the bottom got. At first, it sounded like regular kitchen stuff, plates clinking and knives being sharpened. At one point, I noticed screaming. A great chill ran down my spine. I was overwhelmed by the screaming and the sounds of cutlery growing ever louder. I knew me and my friend were next. While I consider these nightmares, I remain more unaffected by them than anything else. While I'm no stranger to paranormality and actually quite enjoy these dreams, I'm still curious as to what they could mean and about similar experiences anyone has. TLDR. I am a haunted piece of shit.
I'll post my recent one. In my dream, in my old apartment, nighttime, trying to sleep. Multiple ghosts are warping around. In the room, scaring me. Feelings of being watched. They don't stay still for very long. This continues for some time. Somehow convince them to chill out and speak with me. Everything swaps to daytime. The spirits turn into normal humans. I talk to a woman. The woman has many hands. She tells me to look at them. She moves around her body from place to place like a game. The woman even laughs somewhat. The others watch. Suddenly, she tells me to look into her eyes. I know not to, as she'll hypnotize me. In my dream, I conjured a clone of her face. I use it as a mirror on her. The woman becomes frightened and disappears. I then turn the gaze on the other spirits. One by one, they become scared and leave. I woke up after that.
I've had multiple dreams where it ends with me running from something, and my velocity slowing to a standstill until even my trying to flop around is useless. Also multiple where I get shot in the chest to stomach and instantly crumple. Feels like what I imagine it would actually be like to get shot. When pain reaches near max, I always wake up. Here's a more recent one-time dream. In some court hearing. Beginning has man in front speaking of dangers of a new technology, bringing up statistics. 1% of users will experience bleeding in the eye, causing blindness and/or death. But it has already been integrated into society as a whole, probably why we're in a court setting to begin with. While the room is taking in the implications, the room goes dark. Crowd looking at one another once darkness subsides, sweaty. One guy begins to bleed a tear from his right eye, then collapses. Shuddering darkness returns. Darkness subsides once more, we look again. One by one, in a quickened haste, we all begin to bleed from our left eye. We all collapse, presumably dead. One more great blindness fills and empties the room. Once lit, the room begins to play a tune. Seeing through the eyes or lens of a camera, singers and performers begin a performance. No, wait. We are the singers and performers, except we do not have free will. Vocal cords are being pulled to form the song. Arms puppeteered by who knows what trying to fight it, but the grip is too powerful. Contorting us into star patterns and the like. That was the finale of a dream where I was put into situations involving a malfunctioning wristband that was hooked up to your vitals. Each time something went wrong, it would repeat in a different situation, the same exact one with a couple of variables changed. Each time was dire in consequence, however. It was the first dream I captured when I finally started a dream journal, freaked me out. Still feel odd about it today.
All right. Here's your data. Some girls got taken away from somewhere. Don't remember the context exactly. I was experiencing through the eyes of one of the girls and awoke to find myself in a claustrophobic rectangular glass display. My body was transformed and stiff, so I was like a kind of mannequin on display that couldn't really move by my own volition. I couldn't turn my head, and my body was stiff and posed to look striking and entertaining. I couldn't turn my head, but I saw from the corner of my eye the girl I was with in a similar claustrophobic glass container, with the internal mechanism of her new body forcing her to lip-sync and dance to some music that was playing in the background, wide-eyed yet completely dead inside. Basically a puppet with a broken ego and a consciousness forced to watch. The whole thing was for entertainment, and yet nobody was paying any attention to us because we were one attraction out of many from what I had gathered. By the way, this stuff does happen in very hidden parts of the world deep underground. Sleep tight.
Many of my most horrifying nightmares I have forgotten the details of. Here's a simple one that spooked me as a child. It's not particularly disturbing or scary. It's just a bit creepy and it stuck with me. It's early morning before school, and still pretty dark outside. My teacher and the rest of my class walked past my house to pick me up. Almost like a carpool without the car. Classmates are walking in lines of two, like a school trip. They're not speaking to me or paying any attention to me. I'm just walking behind them. I'm constantly struggling to keep up with them. A group of nearly 30 children. As I'm approaching the school, my classmates are so far ahead I can barely see them. They've already walked across the playground and through the school's main doors. I run as fast as I can as to not be late for school. I run past two sprung giant jack-in-the-box statues guarding each side of the school doors. One of them, a distinctive clown with a frozen smile. As I run towards the doors, they slam shut in my face. I try to open them, but they're locked shut. Feeling bad that I'm now late for school. Notice I'm now alone with the jack-in-the-box statues guarding the school. Turn around and stare at the back of one of the clowns. The clown's big head begins turning towards. I close my eyes in the dream. Closing my eyes was my way of exiting a nightmare when things got too much.
I was in a wasteland, scarred earth all around. The only building that was standing was the place I worked at the time. When I entered, a slow beat played. Each drum strike was a second apart. To the beat, an invisible monster of some sort began to come from the back of the building. It would move a set distance each beat, and though I couldn't see it, I knew where it was. It took a great deal of effort and time to reopen the door to escape. I realized later that it was a warning that if I had stayed at the job, it would end in me ending myself, and it nearly did happen. I had been committed last year for a small handful of days, during which I decided I wouldn't go back to that job. Still here somehow, but I think that was just delaying the inevitable. As is, I maybe have another 3 weeks.
Scariest? I don't think I've had scary shit like in the movies where you wake up screaming. Just annoying, weird, creepy, or sad. As a kid, a nightmare about vampires trying to hunt me. I was an adult in the dream, and it was pretty well designed, like I was watching a movie. Recurring nightmare of playing a video game that slowly turns creepy, and I try to exit the game and the program just won't take the command. Camera shifts to first person then, like I was absorbed into the game, and there's no way out. Obviously nightmares with family members dying and wake up at the verge of crying. Nightmares where I get stabbed or shot and actually feel dying. It's a pretty desolate feeling, seeing everything slowly turn to black and there's nothing you can do to avoid it. I just saw a news program where they showed how a young man got stabbed in the heart and he managed to walk a couple of blocks, get inside a store and sad and calmly say, "I don't want to die." Reminded me of my dreams. Reminded.
The scariest dream I ever had happened when I was 7 years old. I had a lot of nightmares as a kid, so I was always a bit uneasy when I went to bed at night and even had a special sort of routine or ritual that I would do. First, I'd wrap my blanket over my head so that only my eyes were uncovered. Then I'd turn to the left to check for monsters. After that, I'd turn to the right to check for monsters. And lastly, I'd very hesitantly look directly in front of me. I'm not sure how long I had been doing the routine for at that point, but it was at least a couple of months. One night, though, I must have fallen asleep right before I started it. I looked to the left. It was completely normal. Just my bedside table, lamp, and a futon with stuffed animals on it. I looked to the right. It was just my wall. Again, nothing out of the ordinary. Completely vivid. Then when I slowly turned to look above me, I saw an entelodont-like creature with black bug eyes staring down at me. I was 100% convinced I was awake all the way up until that point, so it was really reality-bending. I ended up seeing the same monster in my dreams dozens of times after that point, although none of the subsequent dreams were as scary as the first. Even now, it creeps me out when I think about it, or when I look back on the artwork I made around that time. Almost all of it was dedicated to the monsters from my dreams. I even built some shrine out of paper and styrofoam to appease them at one point.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.
There's also a Rumble archive as a backup.